Prologue. What ignites the primitive urges within a man, rendering him powerless to resist? It strikes both the ordained priest and the destitute beggar. For once these primal desires take hold, we are but pawns in their savage game. The body becomes a slave to its own insatiable appetite, as if possessed by a dark and relentless force. The ancient philosopher Plato once wrote, "The passions are the greatest of tyrants over the soul." And yet, despite our advanced society and lofty ideals, we are still vulnerable to the whims of our primal instincts. The struggle to tame the beast within is a constant battle, for the call of the wild can be deafening, and the price of yielding to it, dear. Part 1. The dwelling was a sad sight to behold. Broken walls and shattered windows bore testament to its age and neglect. A musty odor hung heavy in the air, as if the house itself was holding its breath. A leaking roof let in melted ice, causing droplets to splash onto the dirt floor. The resulting puddle was massive, stretching from one corner of the room to the other. Despite the cold and the dampness, the child, just turning 8, clung to the corner, wrapped up in a worn-out blanket. Days of accumulated dirt and grime on her tiny oval face could not hide her eyes, which shone like polished black pearls. Her mouth was cracked, and her nose ran from the cold. Outside, the wind howled like a pack of wolves, and mercilessly whipped snowflakes against the woman's exposed skin. She trudged on, wrapped in a thin summer dress, and a worn-out blanket that did little to shield her from the elements. Despite the bitter cold, she knew she had to answer the summons. 4 powerful individuals had summoned her, and they held her fate in their hands. The councilman, the banker, the judge, and the priest. Part 2. None of the 4 men would listen to her pleas for mercy. The councilman demanded she pays 30 guineas, or her shack would be torn down. He also refused her a work permit, because she was unfit to work. When she protested that she had a strong arm, he insisted she needed a man to stand surety for her. The judge threw out her application, citing that she had no one to reference. But the Constitution demands equal rights for men and women. "Young lady," he had replied, "in this town, I am the Constitution." The banker refused to give her time to pay off her overdue rent. She needed a man to vouch for her. "But I just got a job," she pleaded. "I will work thrice as hard. I really want to help you, Anna, but I can't. Old Gregory can't pay your wages, not without a work permit." The priest would not talk to her, unless she came for confession, and lay bare all her sins. As the representative of God in the town, he cannot plead on behalf of a sinful woman. She was left with no choice. She had looked each of these powerful men in the eyes, and said, "Sir, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to keep my home." "Anything?" She had leaned in closer and whispered, "And who knows, maybe I can find a way to show my appreciation. How about you come by for dinner tonight at 10 p.m.? I promise it'll be worth your while." The eyes of all the men widened in surprise, thoughts whirling around in their heads. "I am not sure that's appropriate," they had stammered. She simply smiled and replied, "I think you'll find it very appropriate, sir. And very enjoyable." Part 3. As a single mother in this cruel terrain, she was viewed with suspicion by the women, and as easy prey by the men. Her very existence was a scandal, a distasteful affront to society. The blame always fell on her. The whispered rumors circulating behind her back at every turn, blaming her for being a bad wife, a terrible mother, and a woman who had failed at life. To give them something to talk about all day, she had visited each home, begging to borrow a set of plates and cutlery. She was expecting very important guests. Each home had slammed the door shut in her face. As she left, she could see eyes boring after her. In her shack, she prepared her meal. Eyes all over town peered to see smoke rise. Not a whiff of smoke could be seen above the broken chimney. Part 4. 4 men clad in hooded clothing plowed through the snow, each anxious not to be seen by a neighbor. For to be seen around the shack of the sinner was sacrilegious. But as fate would have it, they all stood at the doorway of the shackle at exactly 10. each surprised to find the other there, but none prepared to walk back. The priest, since he was the anointed of God, and hence immune from all evil, offered to open the door to hell. 8 pairs of eyes popped out of their sockets. Mouths opened, allowing slimy droops to fall on petticoats. For there in the middle of a makeshift table lay Anna, stark naked, and oiled, surrounded by 4 porcelain plates, forks, knives. A big carving knife lay across her tummy. 2 bottles of wine stood at her head and feet. She was the meal. And what a meal fit for a king! At the windows, there was a shuffle, as the women of the town, curious as to what Anna was serving, had tiptoed after the unsuspecting men. There was a gasp, as they gazed at the perfectly curved body, laying invitingly on the table. A voice, the voice of a child, screamed, "Eat!" There was commotion, as men and women flew from windows and the doorway, toward the meal set before them. Fists flew, teeth snapped, fingers clawed, legs kicked. Jaws were broken, eyes were blackened, limbs were broken. Blood splattered everywhere. When dawn broke, Anna stepped down from the table and surveyed the ramshackle room. The bodies of respectable men and women lay in heaps. The rodents were already having a field day. Anna and her child walked away from the scene, into a bright new day. Epilogue. Plato once said, "Deep down inside us, there is a beast. It is a wild and untamed part of our nature, that must be repressed and controlled for the good of society. The darkness that resides within us all is an ever-present danger, waiting to be unleashed at the slightest provocation. It is a deadly virus, a parasite, that feeds on our deepest fears and insecurities, and it yearns to break free and devour everything in its path. Despite our best efforts to control it, this beast is always lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the opportunity to strike. We may dress it up in respectable clothes and pretend it doesn't exist, but deep down we know that it is there, waiting for its moment to pounce. So be careful with what you let out of yourself. It is hard to get it back in."